If you've been on a cruise lately, well, you probably noticed a certain line at guest services on the last night of the sailing. And no, it's not for billing questions, it's for people there for one reason, to take off their automatic gratuities before that final charge hits their credit card. Now, a few years ago, that line was maybe a little shorter. It's not so short anymore. Cruise line after cruise line have nudged up the recommended daily gratuity in the past year. The service charge on your drinks has been creeping toward 20% on almost now every cruise line when nobody was looking. And the cruise internet has split into two very loud camps about what a decent cruiser is supposed to do about any of it. I have a take on this one, and I'll warn you now, it's probably not the take you're going to expect from either side. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. All right, first of all, I'm not here to scold or judge anyone. I just want to share the situation. I'll tell you what I want to do. But at the end of the day, you just have to do what's best for you. Now, the honest version of this conversation is a hot button issue, and it's a little more uncomfortable than either side would admit. And the part that actually matters doesn't get said out loud nearly enough, so I'll just get right into it. First, we need to talk about why this has turned into a war in the first place. Why is everybody suddenly fighting about the cruise gratuity debate? This is not one cruise line having a moment. Cruise line after cruise line has nudged up that daily gratuity in the past year. Most standard cabins now land somewhere between $16 and $22 per person per day. And one of the very highest is a name you might not expect. It's not one of the big players, but it's Margaritaville at Sea. And they sit at about $22 a night for a standard cabin. And that one is fixed. With Margaritaville, you can't adjust it or remove it at all. And when it comes to high cost, Norwegian is also right up there at 20 bucks. Now on paper, $1 or $2 a day might sound almost too small to argue about. It does not stay small though. A couple on a week-long sailing is now looking at anywhere from $240 to over $300 in gratuities, depending on the cruise line. And that's before they've bought a single drink or booked a single excursion. So you put a family of 4 on that same sailing and you can easily clear 400 bucks without trying, just in gratuities. And when you stack a few dollars a day across multiple people in a room and every night of the trip, the number stops feeling like just pocket change. And the daily gratuity was not the only thing that's moved. More and more cruise lines have been nudging up that service charge on beverages from 18% up to 20%. I took a Royal Caribbean cruise back in the fall. The gratuity on beverages have always been 18%. I noticed it was 20. I questioned it. It went back down to 18. I could tell that they were testing and experimenting with whether or not they could or should increase that to 20%. So 20% has now pretty much become the norm across almost every mainstream cruise line. And this is the kind of change that does not come with an announcement. They just slip it in, they slide it in there, and either maybe you see someone post about it like I did on Facebook, or it just shows up on your bar tab. And maybe you think, hey, on my last cruise, wasn't that 18%? Well, now it's 20. Now, none of these, again, they're not huge on their own, but when they land close together, people are going to start to notice, especially right now when people are becoming a little more cost sensitive because the cost of everything is becoming absolutely outrageous. And that becomes the backdrop for this fight. On one side, you have cruisers, a lot of them longtime loyal cruisers saying, I'm done. I'm taking off the auto gratuities. I'm tired of being nickeled and dimed. This is getting out of control. And I will still tip, but I'm going to hand cash directly to the people who are actually serving me. Now, on the other side, you have folks pointing out that if crew wages go up, you're going to pay for it one way or another, whether it shows up as a gratuity now or it just gets folded quietly into a higher fare later. Now, both camps think the other is missing the obvious. They are both partly right, which is exactly why this argument never seems to end. Now, here's the piece that gets lost, and it's the piece that changed how I think about the whole thing. The automatic gratuity, it is not a tip for your room steward, but is a pooled amount of money that gets split across a long list of crew. And most of those people on that list are people you will never lay eyes on. Yes, your room steward is on it for sure. Yes, your lovely servers in the main dining room, they're on that as well. But so is the assistant who flipped your cabin on the day that your main steward had off. They're also the people on the dish line washing dishes behind the buffet, keeping your food delicious and cooked and prepared and ready for you. It's the laundry crew washing the towels that you left on the floor, the galley staff plating food for thousands of people, and a dozen other roles that keep the ship running smoothly that you never see because it's the behind the scenes stuff. So the whole reason that this gratuity pool exists, at least in theory, is so that the folks doing that invisible work, who often are the lower paid and harder working crew, honestly, get a piece of the pie, because nobody is ever going to walk down to the laundry room to hand the towel person a $20 bill. So that's an important thing, at least for me, in my consideration of how I handle gratuities on a cruise. Now, if you do decide you want to remove gratuities, let's talk about how you do that. First of all, it's important to know a few of them, like Margaritaville at Sea, they don't let you touch gratuities at all. Most of the rest, they do let you adjust them at guest services once those gratuities have posted to your onboard accounts, but you got to do it while you're still on the ship before you walk off. One way or another, you got to physically do that Some would call it walk of shame, which is down to guest services, which is why that line gets really long right before disembarkation, and you have to request there to take those gratuities off. And when you do take them off and tip cash instead, here's what really happens. Maybe you hand your room steward $100. You feel generous, you feel good about yourself. The steward probably very grateful, but that cash usually only reaches the person that you handed it to. The pool that you just opted out of is the thing designed to reach everyone else. Again, that laundry crew, the dish line, the people behind the scenes. They're not seeing any of that $100. You did not redirect your tip to everyone who earned it. You redirected it to the person you just happened to see who was visible, and you quietly dropped everyone that you did not. Now, that's a very different thing from what most people think that they're doing when they stand in that line. So there is a version of opting out that I do think is genuinely defensible, and I'll get to it. But this, I don't think, is it. Now, here's the honest case for removing gratuities. Now, I'm gonna argue the other side because I actually agree with a lot of it, and pretending I don't would be dishonest. So I personally do choose to tip. I not only keep my included gratuities on there, but I often will tip on top of that. And yes, I am aware the extra tips go to the people I see, but I keep my gratuities on so the behind the scenes people benefit as well. But I will say, I can see why people feel differently. Tip culture in this country has gotten completely out of control. You're asked to tip 20% for everything now, if not more. And sometimes you're asked to tip for something like someone's handing you a muffin or they're spinning the screen around. The expectation has crept into places that it really honestly has no business living, and people are exhausted by it, and they have a right to be exhausted by it. I'm exhausted by it, and I tend to be a pretty generous tipper. And when that same pressure follows you onto a cruise ship that you've already paid a lot of money for, and you feel like you're nickeled and dimed by everything, that reaction is not unreasonable. It's very human. And there's a very real argument buried in this discussion that I think is really important to uncover. And that is, if a cruise line needs to pay its crew more, basically what's happening is that money is coming out of our pocket no matter what. The company can put it in the fare, or they can put it in the gratuity line and let us feel personally responsible for it. So guess which one they picked? Most lines will not even tell us how that pool gets divided. There's some conspiracy and controversy out there of, well, does the cruise line even pass those gratuities on to the crew, or do they keep it? So you're being asked to feel guilty about a number whose destination they intentionally keep vague and whose distribution they keep vague. The whole structure lets the advertised price of a cruise stay low, and it shifts that emotional weight of the crew pay onto you, onto me, the guest. So we're the ones lying awake at night wondering if I'm a bad person, instead of the company explaining why its base wages are what they are, which, spoiler alert, it's not good. That's not an accident, it's by design. So when someone tells me that they're removing their auto gratuities because they're tired of being guilted into subsidizing a multi-billion-dollar company's payroll, I don't think they're a villain. I think they've correctly identified who's actually being cheap in this scenario, and it's not the passenger. So what do we do about all this though, right? So while I see both sides, I wanna share with you what I choose to do, and I wanna know what you do. Drop your comments down below, let's talk about it. For me personally, I do pay my gratuities. I keep those included gratuities. I never prepay because I think that's just pointless. As a business professor, I get hung up on the time value of money. Sorry, nerd alert. I see no reason to hand my money over to a cruise line months before I ever take the cruise. And also, if I ever have to cancel, I'd rather not try to chase down a refund on something I really didn't have to pay for in advance anyway. So I keep those auto gratuities on and just let those hit my account on the last day of the cruise. But then I do almost always tip extra in cash on top of that to those visible people who make my trip better. So for my room steward, I usually do 20, 25 bucks per person for a sailing up to about 5 nights, a little bit more on longer trips. And I do generally split it. So say I'm gonna tip 100 bucks, I'll usually do 50 on the first day and say I'll tip more at the end. And I do leave the other part at the end of the cruise. Whether or not that gets you better service, I don't know. I feel like I always get good service for the most part, regardless of how you do it. But some people have strong opinions on that as well. Now, I'm not a big drinker, so I don't go to the bar, but I do get some coffee. I'll usually add $1 to those drinks as well, but make sure before you do that, you do know you're gonna get 18 to 20% now tacked onto it already. So you are effectively tipping twice in that case. And porters who take my bag, if I do check my bag on embarkation day, I usually give them $2 to $5 a bag, depending on how big or heavy they are. So that's just my personal system. That's my approach on how I handle it, but everyone has their own way of doing it. So at the end of the day, should you take the gratuities off? Here is my real answer. Oh, and side note, Virgin Voyages fans, be aware, I'm a little frustrated with them, as a lot of loyal Virgin cruisers are, because they built their entire brand on no nickel and diming, everything's included, no tipping pressure. But late last year, they followed the crowd and they've pulled gratuities back out of the fare, and also now have turned them into a separate line item. So I loved that Virgin did it differently. I wish the other cruise lines did do it that way, but alas, here we are. It is what it is. So yes, tip culture, it's out of control. Yes, the cruise lines, they are running a genuinely exploitive game. They exploit us, the customers by guilting us into covering wages that honestly belong in the fare. So they get to advertise, look at our low prices, and they let us carry the moral weight and the cost of it. And they exploit the crew at the same time, the people who sign these long contracts, who live away from their families for months, who make very low base wages, and who depend on that pooled tip system that they have zero control over. So nobody in this arrangement is being treated fairly except for the company that built it. So I think at the end of the day, we need to point our finger at the real guilty party, which is the cruise line. But at the end of the day, what are we gonna do about it? Yeah, we could just not cruise. But for those who do still choose to cruise and just shake your head like me of like, this is stupid, it shouldn't be this way, but it is, you gotta decide. Are you gonna keep the auto gratuities on, or are you gonna handle it differently? And there's really no right or wrong answer. You just have to decide for yourself what you feel best doing. So, controversial topic, I know. Let me know your thoughts, drop them down below, and let's talk ship.